Welcome back to another episode of Technology for Independence with Christopher Cooley. Today, Christopher is going to be talking with Nathan Morgan about autism, so stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Technology for Independence with Christopher Cooley. April is Autism Awareness Month, and today Chris is going to be talking with Nathan Morgan, who is going to be sharing a lot of information about different aspects of autism. Chris, always a pleasure talking with you.
Always a pleasure to be here, Patrick. A couple weeks ago, I was up in Columbus, Ohio, at a convention that they were having. I was in Columbus for a convention. There was one table that was set up that was called Milestone Autism Resources. And I really liked the idea because I know that April was going to be Autism Awareness Month. So I reached out to them and to see if they would be a guest on our show today. They were willing to jump in there and do what they can to spread awareness. So Nathan is here with us today and going to talk about resources and different things to help the community learn and be able to research things that they may need. And so, Nathan, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Nathan Morgan. I am a Director of Autistic Supports at Milestones Autism Resources, which is an organization in Northeast Ohio. I'm a licensed social worker. I received my master's degree from Case Western Reserve University, and I'm also an autistic individual myself. I was diagnosed with autism when I was a kid, received a lot of therapy services and supports, and so what I do within my role at Milestones is I blend my personal and professional expertise to help advocate for supports in the community to inform people about topics related about autism. A big chunk of my role is really focused on the advocacy piece, really trying to create a much more inclusive and understanding society for all of us. Milestones as an organization has been around for over 20 years, was established by two parents of children with autism. And we have a variety of services. We have a free help desk that helps connect individuals to information about therapies and services and connect people with individuals in the community and information. We have a annual conference every year where we have individuals of all sorts of backgrounds, professionals, autistic individuals, parents, and others who come together to discuss various topics about autism, to learn together and to enhance the community's understanding of autism. And we offer a variety of other services like that. So we offer a variety of those services to help create a much more inclusive society.
Nathan, you said that you went to college and got a degree. How was that, knowing that you had autism and, some things stresses us out and causes us to lose direction? How would that affect you in the college world?
So I had a really unconventional educational background growing up. I used to, the professional technical term for it is elope, but I think the easier way of saying it, more accessible way of saying it is I used to just run away from school because I would get so overwhelmed from all of the sensory input that I would get overwhelmed. I would hide under my desk. I'd run into the hallway. There were even times where I ran home, which was a couple miles away from the school. And like as a 8, 9-year-old, that can be some real safety concerns regarding that. So that continued for a while, and eventually I ended up falling through the cracks in my education system. I grew up out of state. I'm not an Ohio native, but I fell through the cracks in the education system and ultimately didn't end up graduating high school. I ended up getting my GED a couple years later after I kind of fell through the crack. So really starting college was interesting and complex for me. I had not a single day spent in a high school classroom ever. So it was coming from, sort of that elementary school, middle school into like this college. And to be honest, it was a little overwhelming, but I think I found some comfort in a few different things. First, college let me pick my specific areas of interest, and I could focus my studies on things that I was interested in. I know sometimes in the autism community, we'll talk about special interests. And so, really being able to deep dive into those was very rewarding in a lot of ways. It also helped me to feel like I could succeed. I started to make connections through some of the social groups that were available on campus. So that helped. And I ultimately ended up doing quite well because I liked being able to create structure. I think the hardest part at first was trying to identify what structure worked for me. But once I had those in place, I was able to succeed.
Most of us have only seen through the media a little bit about autism. The movie is Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman playing a very autistic individual who is really good with numbers. That's the only knowledge I had about what it was to be autistic. Can you share with the audience really what are the different aspects of autism?
Well, autism is much more diverse than I think a lot of the media representations portray out there. I, for one, can't do really anything with numbers without a calculator, without some of that. I'm not going to do that. I even had to I took a formal logic class instead of the math class because when you have the LER requirements for an undergraduate college degree, you still have to pick up your math classes and your science classes and your English classes and such. So I ended up taking a formal logic, which was a little bit more structured and more up to my speed. But yeah, so with the depictions of autism, I think we've chronically had or historically had some pretty poor representation. It tends to depict all individuals with autism as math savants or scientists, and a lot of us do have interests in those areas. But I've met plenty of autistic individuals who like arts and music and games, and there's so much variance in there. I know several individuals who are even passionate about animals and veterinary medicine, and even just dog walking and other things that you can do with animals. So I think one of the things that we do need as a society is to have much more discussion about autism. And I think bringing people, who are autistic to the forefront of the conversation allows us to see much more variance in how we interact in our communities, our interests, our goals, our values, our perspectives that I think we miss out on when we have super stereotyped roles. Because it can be really fun to watch someone doing all the number counting and doing that, but I don't think it's a realistic representation of what a lot of people experience.
The kind of autism that you have, was it developed early in your life? How did your parents diagnose that?
I had a lot of issues growing up. I was a preemie baby growing, like I was born premature. I was a twin, so that also tied into some things. And I wasn't meeting my language development milestones. You wouldn't know that today because I'll talk your head off. I'll just talk up a storm. But growing up, I went through speech therapy. I worked a lot on occupational therapy and things as well because I had a lot of sensory difficulties. I had fine motor skill development delays. I had gross motor delays. I went through physical therapy to work on my gait, which is the way I walk, GAIT. And I went through a lot of those kinds of therapies and services, but I wasn't formally diagnosed with autism at that time. I was identified as having different developmental delays. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder as a child. I actually started taking a medicine called diazepam when I was about 2 years old, which is an anti-anxiety medication. I have the impression that it's a pretty potent medication, and I've continued to take that off and on over the years. I had sleep disturbances and disorders. And when I ended up turning, 7, 8, 9-ish, we ended up meeting a doctor who was really informed about autism, at least for that time period, who pointed my mom into that direction and said, that Nathan has all of these conditions and all of these diagnoses, but this might fit better. And so that's really where the topic of autism really entered into my family's discussions. I was born in the 90s, and I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and there wasn't a lot of information available at that time. And a lot of the information that was coming out was rooted in misinformation. So there were lots of things about vaccines cause autism myth and all of that stuff that was coming out at the time. There was also just a general lack of understanding of what autism was. I think we have come a long way. I think there's still so much more that we can do, but certainly made a lot of progress over the past 30 some odd years.
You talked about Milestone. How can Milestone help individuals? And what's available there? We need educationals and folks that are afraid to let their child live independently. There's a lot of fears going on there. How can Milestone help with all that?
I think Milestones can help in a couple different ways. So Milestones is a connector. It was started by two parents who met in a therapy waiting room who had questions, and they wanted to know what type of options are available for their children to have. And so from there, bringing professionals together created opportunities to connect individuals within the community to different resources and services. And so I think that's one of the ways that Milestones can help is act in that role of connector, sharing information about evidence-based information that's kind of rooted in our current scientific understanding of autism, sharing lived experiences by connecting people together through our conference and some of those other offerings that we have. We also do training. So if you're an organization, Milestones does a lot of training about inclusive practices, about accessibility, and other ways of engaging with the autistic community in a more approachable, more accessible, and intentional way. So those are all ways that Milestones might be able to support. Additionally, we have a lot of services outside of Milestones that are growing in the community, a lot of stuff that's being led by autistic and other neurodivergent individuals. So for example, through a grant that Milestones had received back in 2020, I helped to establish the Northeast Ohio Neurodivergent Social Group, which was based out of Northeast Ohio, and had lots of opportunities for people to connect over shared interests like video games and movies and Dungeons and Dragons and art and those types of topics. Then that has also kind of moved into a community operated group. So that's no longer under the umbrella of Milestones, but we created it for the community to take stewardship over. But we see a lot of those kinds of things popping up across the community, and we're trying to create sort of through our services, we want to connect people to those services that are led by neurodivergent individuals because at the core of this autism movement is that nothing about us without us quote and sort of idea that individuals who are autistic should be involved in helping to lead that conversation moving forward. We also have a big focus on increasing autistic visibility in a variety of ways. We have a lot of individuals who started receiving services when they were kids, who then went on to become therapists and who went on to provide those kinds of services, or who advocate in other ways. So we want to try to create opportunities for neurodivergent individuals to advocate and to lead the conversation because for so many years it had felt like we might have been dragged along, but we weren't involved in guiding that conversation forward. And so I think the current trend within the autism community is to elevate that sort of autistic perspective into advocacy and providing services and being involved in guiding the conversations moving forward. You can access most information about Milestones under milestones.org, milestones.org. We do have a lot of information on there about our free help desk services, which help connect anyone, with the types of information and resources that they're looking for. So if you're looking for information about creating a more accessible space, some members of our help desk will be able to help you find that. If you're looking for a new therapist or a new doctor, we can help with that. And if you're looking for a community that might be available in your area, we can help with that too. I think ultimately we know that there are so many needs. We try to support as that connector to connect people to that information. So in areas where we may not have all of the answers to your questions, we'll also always try to ensure that we can connect you with someone who might have those answers.
One of the areas that we're always interested in is the kind of technology that helps individuals with autistic difficulties. Can you share some of the technology that you feel might be of great benefit?
I actually, I know we're meeting right now via Zoom. One of the things that I've noted as of late through a lot of my discussions with other neurodivergent individuals as well is that having opportunities for remote employment, having opportunities for connection via these kind of online platforms has created some accessibility because I can completely make sure that the environment that I'm currently having this conversation within is sensory friendly to my needs. Whereas if I were to have to go into another space, I might not have that same level of control over my sensory environment. So it's really, I think, helped me perform better within some of my work tasks and some of those types of things. But it's also been helpful for connecting with other people in other spaces. Whereas I used to be very limited to connecting with people who are like down the street or kind of nearby. I'm able to have a conversation with you, and we're not even in the same city right now. We're probably well over 100 miles apart, and we're able to have these kinds of conversations. So I know that that's not so much like a formalized accessibility technology, but it is something that I've seen has really helped improve the conversation surrounding autism. I've seen conferences and other spaces in the over COVID, Milestones had speakers presenting from California, from Texas, from so many different states about, their perspectives and what autism is like within their environment and what types of supports they've found are helpful in their communities. And, similarly, I think that model just helps create this bigger dialogue about what types of supports are out there. We're not as limited to. And I know Ohio, we also have a lot of rural counties. We have a lot of spaces without many services. There are lots of service deserts out there, as we refer to them, where there might be a county that doesn't have a single therapist that provides a certain type of service. So having options for telehealth and such can be helpful. Well, certainly in-person services can be a much more like a gold standard in a lot of ways and provide services in a different way. And some people really do need in-person services as well. So that's not to say that it's a replacement, but certainly having this kind of video conferencing technology provides those supports. It also, has closed captioning and other things. So for a lot of sensory reasons, I'll usually use closed captioning for like when I'm watching television, but I can also use it in these kinds of meetings so that I can communicate more effectively. And I think a lot of other people like to have those types of things as well.
If I have a child that I suspect may have some problems, autistic problems, what should I do? What should be my plan of action?
Well, the first step would probably be speaking with your pediatrician or your primary care physician, expressing some of the questions and things that you've identified and sharing that there. A formalized autism assessment can take, depending on where you live, it could take a year or so to be able to. There are waiting lists for a lot of the services. We have a lot of provider shortages across the entire state, across the entire country, actually, as well. So having more people who are interested in autism kind of going out and getting specialization and providing diagnostic assessments and such could be very helpful. But knowing that while you're waiting for that, you can still access a lot of services. If you're in Ohio, you can contact your County Board of Developmental Disability. If your child is under the age of 3, you may be able to access Help Me Grow services, Bright Beginning. In Northeast Ohio, we call it Bright Beginnings, but it's Help Me Grow across the rest of the state. And those types of services can be really helpful for early intervention and support for language building, for other things like that. Also connecting with the schools. The public schools can be a very helpful way of doing that. You can get an IEP and really get some services even before a formalized autism medical assessment is done because they can do their own assessments through the school to determine eligibility for school services. Having just a school classification or an IEP might not address the full range of needs. Sometimes it can be a stopgap, but also contacting Milestones. We're always happy to help guide families through creating a customized plan to get their needs met because so many family situations are just so unique that there's not always a one size fits all approach.
When I went to the school system, it was primarily in the 60s. I graduated in 68. And to be frank, I never ran across anyone that was considered autistic. Is autism just a recent disorder?
It's not. I'm actually encountering a lot of people. Some of the highest rates of new diagnoses that we're seeing are actually individuals who are 30 and up, people who had missed a diagnosis in school because maybe their traits, they learned other coping way strategies around it. Maybe they struggled for so many years as well. We encounter a lot of people who have just kind of struggled, always kind of wondering. They'll ask themselves and they'll say this quote like, what was wrong with me? Well, there was nothing wrong with you. You weren't supported by your community in the ways that you needed to be. And so getting that diagnosis has really opened up a lot of doors for people. We also saw that there was a lot of segregation for individuals with disabilities. If you started to present with any developmental delays or difficulties, often in the past, you would go into like this back room separated from the other kids. And over the past, many years, we've really focused much more on integration. And I think that's the ultimate goal of really a lot of these movements, and the whole reason for we call it Autism Appreciation Month at Milestones, but I know a lot of places refer to it as Autism Awareness Month or Autism Acceptance Month. But regardless of what you call it, I think the general idea is we want to create a much more inclusive world where people can be themselves, people can be accepted for who they are, and people can be supported. Because neurodiversity references how we're all different in our perspectives. We all have different needs and different supports that help us. But we should be kind to each other. We should be compassionate towards each other's needs. And we have a lot of value to add to our societies. I think if you haven't met any autistic individuals and socialized, bring some people into your social group. I think you'll have a lot of fun speaking to just the general audience here. But, we have some pretty cool interests and ideas to share with people.
What do you think about living on your own or being able to get a job? I know that a lot of individuals, parents, friends, family members, whoever they may be, may think, oh, I don't feel like you need that because your behavior issues, or, there's always something that they want to hold on to keep them back because they think that they'll be protected, at home instead of being out on their own. So what do you think about that? And how can Milestone help with somebody like that?
Of course. So I know everyone has very different circumstances. So sometimes creating a very blanket statement can be challenging. But I do think that, really the civil rights of autism and the disability movement is really focusing on, that right to fail and that right to be able to make mistakes and that right to learn from those mistakes. So that's one piece of things, but also that right to be supported and to have that community. So often when we're having discussions about independent living, like I live by myself, my family lives separate from me, but I'm not living fully independently. I don't think anyone is. I don't think most people are actually, even individuals who aren't autistic, because we have our families to support us. Like I routinely call my mom and ask questions or I had some tree branches fall out of my tree and fall down onto my shed, and I had to ask my mom, like, what do I do about this? I'm in panic mode here. Come help me. And, we all have that. We are all, interconnected with each other. So I think it would be a shame if someone lived so fully independently that they had nobody else surrounding them and enriching their lives. But I do think that there can be, different styles that people want to live. People might want to have their own space for their own privacy to be able to develop their own life in the ways that they choose. So maybe you want to separate from your parents and move into a different space, like an apartment or somewhere. Going through the steps of doing that can be challenging. There's so much that can go into that. Learning financial planning, the day-to-day, the executive functioning for maintaining a space, doing the laundry, doing the dishes, knowing what to do in a crisis situation. And some of that is trial and error. Some of that's preparing for it as best as you can. Ways Milestones can help is supporting you with by connecting you with professionals who have expertise in those areas, sharing information about some best practices that are emerging in those areas, but really even just having a conversation to create, a customized plan, because, you can go online and see, these are some of the good steps to do, but maybe that doesn't fit your situation. So having someone to talk through that with you can be very helpful.
Share with the audience a couple tips that you would recommend when it's regarding autism.
So I think the first big tip is really expand your ideas of what autism is. I think so many ideas about autism are limited to the stereotypes that exist in our media. And, there's this expression that we use: if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because all of our circumstances are so unique and varied. While we do have a lot of differences, we do have some similarities too. And so we often will try to find community and understanding through that. I think for me, it's been very helpful to engage with other autistic and neurodivergent individuals to, know that I'm not alone, and to have that sort of normalization of some of the struggles that I've experienced. And I think that that can be very enriching. We all want communities. We all want communities that support and understand us. And our goal is to create that so that all communities have such a broad understanding of autism that really, we walk into a space and we're fully supported and understood there. But we're also, so I think that's the big one. Find that community. Don't think of autism as in such limited terms. Just continue to talk to other autistic people and have those discussions. Hear stories. Go online. Go to YouTube. Go listen to this podcast. Listen to, other people sharing their stories, and learn about all of these diverse perspectives.
We're talking with Nathan Morgan, Technology for Independence, with Christopher Cooley. Chris, great guests. I really appreciate your bringing Nathan on.
Thank you, Nathan, for being here today. Great information and great, opportunities out there that if anybody's struggling, you gave some good tips and about autism and not to be afraid. And, I'm looking forward to have you on again and talk about more programs and more successful programs that are out there to help each other. So thank you for being a guest on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again.